What is Deep Springs?
It's the smallest college in America. It is at a cattle ranch in California, 28 students approximately.
Why subject yourself to what the average person would assume to be torturous?
Yeah.
Are you uncomfortable by the idea of dropping out? Are you scared?
At this point, I'm not scared.
What do you think it says about the education system? Why is that the case, that someone as intellectually curious as you is not itching to go to college?
It really does sadden me how broken education in America and in the world is.
You once went 3 weeks without looking at a screen. What did you learn from doing that?
The stupidest thing that happened was I had this camping trip in Alaska.
This is not a good way to start this.
Yeah. Could it result in an event that led to human extinction? Yeah. But when people hear anarcho-capitalism and think it's all about the corporation, they're right. But the image that sparks in the brain is not right.
Convince me that I'm not going to get jumped in this society.
Almost everyone in the society does not want to be jumped.
Like, what if I'm confident that every single guy in my crew can beat up every single guy in your crew?
They still won't do it, right?
Why not?
Because if one person who still sleeps 8 hours a day and still has 2 hands and 1 brain and 2 eyes is 10 million times more effective at providing value to society, there's an inefficiency.
You've just revealed to me that you're dropping out of Deep Springs.
Yes.
So if it's okay with you, I'd like to start there.
Yeah.
We talked about it a little bit, but why did you drop out of Deep Springs?
Yeah, so Deep Springs is a hell of a program, and I was super excited about it going into it. And I mean, it's a lot of effort to apply, and like I was like super all in, like in all of senior year of high school. Through the process, it was a lot of hours, and I was excited. And I got there, and I think I was disappointed in some ways. I don't think it was all too different from what I had expected, but I think really the feeling of being there was not something I could have imagined, or at least imagined well beforehand. And so like getting there and experiencing the things that I knew were going to happen, and like understanding what that felt like was an experience, and it was a new experience. And there was a lot I learned from being there. But I guess I'd say there was enough kind of pulling me out, enough things that it was limiting me from doing enough of my interests that weren't really supported in that environment. And I guess I wasn't like pulled back in enough by what the program was offering to kind of fully commit to a second year. It was a really hard decision because obviously like it's an incredible opportunity. It's like, I mean, not so many people get the chance to do it. It's like super unique, and in terms of like if I am lucky enough to live for 90 plus years, then like having that variety of experience like is not something that I guess I'm gonna be able to get very often, just because of how different a place it is and an intellectual culture it is from almost everywhere else. So it was a hard decision, and I think we've talked, I mean, vaguely about how I feel about being there throughout my time when I've seen you periodically. So I think you have a sense for why that was for me. But yeah.
Yeah, I guess what I'm wondering is like how different is it than regular academia? Well,
I mean, I'm not exactly the right person to ask because I don't think I know regular academia too well.
All right. Well, you did spend 13. Well, didn't you move to Singapore actually for 2 years?
Yeah. So I went to.
But point being, you spent a lot of your life at Fieldson, which I think most people, whether or not you were giving it your all, I think most people would consider that to be like a good example of traditional schooling.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think that's actually right. And I think I did have like some degree of contrast in comparison to my school in Singapore, which I was at for 2 years when I was in late elementary school, 4th and 5th grade. But other than that, I was at Fieldston, and I think, I mean, it is quite different. Deep Springs is like an educational experience. It's not like an academic classroom learning experience. It's much broader than that. And so I think the classroom experience is very traditional, and I I think the classroom experience at Fieldston is also reasonably traditional. Like, I mean, City Sem is obviously like a total exception, but apart from that, like, there's not like a crazy amount of experimentation in Fieldston High School. In the lower school, it's a different story because a lot of the teachers are coming from like places like Bank Street, which are kind of these experimental teachers' colleges, or not experimental, but kind of newer age and more progressive. But I think the high school is like you said a good example of what like a classroom looks like, and I think the classroom at Deep Springs is probably a little more like academically conservative, like even compared to Fieldston, which I don't think is like particularly progressive in its education. Maybe it was progressive, maybe 140 years ago, but not so much anymore. I think it's pretty standard in a lot of ways in terms of structure. So yeah, I think Deep Springs is like super experimental and super unique in this one way, and then also like totally conservative and, in my opinion, like slightly regressive in this other way. And they're both part of the learning experience, but one is obviously the academics, and the other is like really the other 2/3, if not more, of the learning experience in the labor and governance.
Yeah, do you want to just quickly say, in case on the off chance that someone who doesn't know us both is listening?
Yes.
what is Deep Springs?
Deep Springs is a college in California. It's the smallest college in America. It offers a liberal arts education, but mostly focuses on philosophy and classic literature. It is at a cattle ranch in California. It's 28 students approximately, not more than 30, usually not less than 22 unless something bad has happened. So what's done there is split broadly into 3 categories. One is the academics, 2 is the labor, so the students are heavily involved in the upkeep of the school, the campus, and the ranch, and the farm. And the third is governance. So the students, because it's so small and it's such a kind of community-oriented place in some ways, the students are really involved in the administration of the school. And that's everything from choosing the next incoming class of students through the applications process to the curriculum committee, which hires professors and kind of organizes classes and whatnot.
So why subject yourself to what the average person would assume to be torturous?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think I've been thinking about this a little bit. And yeah, I think that anyone who would ever end up at Deep Springs has to be curious about like that experience in some way. Like there's something in your life that's like doing that, doing something as different and unique as that for 2 years. Like there's a drive towards that, and often people aren't ending up there, or maybe they get in, but they often don't choose to go unless they're like really excited and motivated about that. And so I think that's different for each person.
that thing being Deep Springs, or
that thing being the kind of experience that Deep Springs is.
Okay,
so like I think it really would be torture for most people. Like it's a lot. I mean, like it's a lot of work. Like there were times when I like wasn't getting a lot of sleep because I had kind of like 30 to 40 hours of like manual labor to do a week on the farm per se.
For most people hear that and assume like, okay, not getting a lot of sleep, that's perfectly normal in college. You taking school so seriously that you're not getting sleep, like, that's a totally different story.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just
not
me.
to just joking.
But no, I understand. I think that's not an uncommon thing, and I think it is like a degree more intense than kind of the pulling the all-nighter for college, because you really don't kind of have off time. Like you're there for like 2 months at a time, like minimum. Often people are there for 4 or 6 months at a time without leaving. And so like you are doing it. You're just totally invested because there's nothing else to do. And the program is so structured around each student participating so totally in each kind of aspect of the program that like there's just very little flexibility to be doing much else, and the intensity is quite high because of that.
Yeah, and I could imagine that would be. Was that one of the driving forces that kind of led you to consider dropping out? Because knowing you like to have a lot of kind of flexibility within your schooling.
Yes. Well, I like to have flexibility within my most things, and I think I like to think that I'm not discriminant about where I like my flexibility.
True.
The educational institutions
Fair enough.
often can't kind of work with that, but who's to say if that's an accurate kind of description of things? But yeah, I think that was pretty much like the main. I mean, it's a generalized and simplified kind of explanation, but yeah, that lack of flexibility in the program, and kind of my interests, which are not only kind of broad as like that kind of take place in multiple kind of intellectual activities or capacities, but really like like kind of in a domain separate often from the intellectual culture at Deep Springs, which is it's quite specifically focused often on literature and philosophy kind of through the books, and like kind of focusing almost entirely on a single or maybe at most like a couple written texts at a time, kind of per class, per assignment. You're always analyzing like through the text in a very structured way. And that is just not flexible enough for the work that I'm most interested in, which is often kind of quite kind of chaotic and not really well documented in one place in a way where you can kind of convincingly feel like you're learning just by looking at a single document or piece of media. And those things are just not to be obscure about it. Like I'm interested in technology, economics, math, a chunk of the time. And I spend a lot of my time kind of thinking in those domains. Kind of, I'd say the closest I get to something that Deep Springers would be kind of engaged in is something like a political theory, but I'm coming at it through an economics lens, and they're coming at it through like a philosophy lens. So it like, even though like that might be the only meeting point really for my intellectual interests and the intellectual interests kind of at Deep Springs, it's still limited.
Well, you don't think that could be an advantage though, because you guys kind of thinking in your diverse ways could enrich the discussion? Yeah,
and so this I think, I mean, obviously going into the program, I was aware that they didn't support, at least directly, my interests. And I was perfectly okay with that. And to be honest, I was excited about it for the reason you stated, which is like, if I can bring a totally different perspective and different sets of information to the intellectual life and the community, then like I think that's a win-win. Like I'll learn, and hopefully other people will also learn from me. And I mean, I kind of gave a couple of shots at this, but I think there's a lot of, even though it is small and flexible, there's a lot of kind of institutional structure that is difficult to change there. And honestly, like the kind of thing that I wouldn't want to change. Like I think I did want to change it, but every time I was like kind of fighting to do so, fighting to make a difference in this program, I was like, well, there's a sense that like maybe this is just not what this place is for, what it's here to do, because it's been doing this more or less a similar thing for over 100 years. It was founded in the early 20th century, 1917, and so and it has so much kind of lineage and so much history that like me coming in and feeling like I want a different program and like trying to kind of put that forward. Not that it is shot down. I mean, it's not. Like people are open to discussion, but I think there's just too much to overcome and not enough people kind of excited about it. Like just alone myself, or maybe with one other person. Maybe we do something, but I mean, is that worthwhile for the program? Is that good for the program outside of what it would do for us, like me and that other person, or is it kind of selfish? So I was kind of stuck in this spot where I was like just really not sure what to do with that, even though I was excited to kind of be in this place that was like had a different intellectual kind of focus than I, just because I would be able to learn. I was like at the same time having a lot of trouble kind of being able to operate in that.
Yeah, so I guess it sounds like coming in, the attitude was very, radically changing your academic experience, hopefully for the better.
Yeah.
There is kind of a cultural difference between their interests and your interests, but that could be an advantage.
Yeah.
And then ultimately you get there and you kind of realize that, while it sounds like the experience was good in some ways, the sort of intensity makes it difficult for you to keep up your kind of side interests, and on top of that, you're finding it difficult to work through the difference in interest between you and the other students, which kind of ultimately pushes you out.
Yeah, I think you really need to have kind of a level of almost like rest and like time in your week that is like kind of on the chiller side, to be able to have like the kind of
peace of mind.
Well, peace of mind important, obviously, but like even just like to do the non-obvious thing, right? Like if you're busy doing something and like it doesn't stop, like it's not usually during the time that you're like in the action of doing something that you think about changing it. It's often in like kind of external or like reflective kind of phase, which is often different than like mid-action. And I think there was so much doing and so much involvement that it was really hard to kind of make that work. For me, making that work was like being able to do some of my own work and pursue my intellectual interests while I was there. And I think for like adapting the culture, like that does mean like kind of engaging in a curious, broader way. I think that like that didn't really happen. It wasn't part of the culture because there was so much action and so little kind of time reflecting on that.
So what's next? What are you gonna do instead of school?
Well, I've been doing a lot. I'm coming here having not really slept for like 3 days.
Ooh,
I maybe
nobody noticed. You seem sharp.
Thank you. I'm on the afterburners definitely, but I've slept not so much because I've really been working a lot and I've been enjoying it, and it's been great. I have kind of 3 things going right now.
What are those 3 things?
Those 3 things are, thing 1 is I've just begun. It took a long time to kind of get credentialed and move through the bureaucracy, but I've just begun learning how to use some equipment at this lab at Columbia. It's called the Nano Initiative.
Oh, sick!
And
nice.
I went to my first training actually yesterday. I'd been to one orientation before, so it was my second time at the lab at the space. And there's a bunch of equipment there that I can use to make semiconductors,
awesome.
Which is this technology which powers a lot of things. There's been talk about it in I guess the news over the past couple of years. It's kind of come to the fore because the valuation of the companies that produce them has gone up a lot. This kind of was sparked in COVID when like all the cars that were kind of sitting in parking lots, in dealers, like kind of like incomplete or in on the factory floor and just kind of stuck, like clogging up the manufacturing cycle for almost all vehicles. The problem was that they couldn't get these chips, these circuits that they needed to put in. And so
sorry, what can you explain that a little bit more? Just I didn't fully
so there's I guess the base of it is that there's this technology. It's called semiconductors, and what it is basically an electrical light switch. So instead of you kind of having to flick the switch to kind of have the current pass through the circuit, there's a separate signal, and so if that signal is active, then you kind of have electricity flowing through this circuit, and if it's not active, if there's no like electricity or charge present there, then the circuit is blocked.
Okay.
And so this is the foundation of pretty much all computers. All computation is done by manipulating and organizing these light switches. Like you could build an iPad made out of light switches that you flick, but you would have to flick them really fast and in a really organized way, and doing that with an electrical semiconducting transistor is what they're called, is what the iPad actually does, because you can do it quickly and you can do it at scale. And so the technology to build these It's done through a process called photolithography, and basically you kind of have this layer of glass. It's like pure silicon, so it's extremely purified sand that you would find on the beach, like remarkably purified. Like the numbers are crazy. It's like pure. It's a pure crystal basically, and so you have this bottom layer, and you kind of you deposit this layer of resist on top, and the resist is kind of like a photonegative. Like you can expose through it, and then it will kind of shine like a stencil onto the layer of resist, and then that resist will be chemically changed by the light that you pass to it, and then you etch it. You kind of bathe it in a chemical that will etch away the portions that you have exposed to the light. And so you build up these structures like layer by layer that you can think about it like with the stencil. You have a stencil per layer, and you kind of are depositing this resist, you're washing it away, you're adding metals, you're doing all these things. You're like kind of building a layer cake of technology, of transistors often for computer logic, like the processor in a computer, or a phone, or an iPad. But there's a lot of other things you can do with that technology of kind of building things layer by layer. On like a super small scale, like all of these, like the transistors that they make these days are on the order of like 10 nanometers in size, so like really, really, really small. And there's like billions of them on a given chip in a phone or a computer. So this technology is just extremely powerful, and it was the limiting factor, like that manufacturing process. And factories shut down in Asia predominantly that were building these very basic chips for cars, like that's like where the bottleneck in the supply chain was. So all of a sudden chips were in the news like for the first time in a meaningful way. Yeah. And then
so the cars couldn't get these chips.
The cars were basically blocked entirely. They couldn't get out of the manufacturing facility because of like a 2 cent semiconductor. And so everyone was like, what the hell's going on here? And now so that was the first kind of story.
These factories were making the semiconductors specifically for cars.
Specifically for cars and other technologies like refrigerators, like these kind of very basic things.
And those factories shut down.
Shut down because of COVID.
And then that, I guess, showed people the power of these things and how much we rely on them.
How important they are. Yeah. I mean, even though this was like a particularly simplistic example of them, like a 2 cent one, like, I mean, the ones that are powering modern supercomputers are like, you pay like $40,000 per chip. So there's a whole scale of like the low end and the high end, and obviously there's a price difference corresponding. But yeah, that was like kind of one of the first stories about this technology that really made big news. Yeah. And then more recently it's been AI, because AI runs on this. Yeah. So the valuation of companies like NVIDIA, which is like now worth like $3 trillion, and like maybe a little over a year ago was like 200 billion. So
yeah. No, we're good.
Yeah. So
I just wanted to make sure it was connected to the right microphone.
Anyway, going back to the thing. Yeah. So this lab at Columbia has tools which you can use to make this technology. So I'm learning about that, and I eventually want to start a business building those as a service. It's a very specific segment because obviously there's a lot of money going into a lot of this industry, but I'm gonna try to address a part of it that I think is more or less unaddressed. So that's thing one. Thing two is illiterate.ai. Okay. Illiterate.ai. Oh. is
it out?
So the webpage illiterate.ai, by the time this podcast is online, will be linked to my app, which is up.
Oh, so sick, dude.
We're just waiting on the DNS backend of this URL to be
I don't
connected.
know, man. My post production is quick.
Yeah.
it's extremely slow. Yeah, I'm sure it'll be out.
It'll be out in 12 hours.
There will be updates.
So if you can beat in 12 hours, then you win.
Okay.
But yeah, I actually, the reason I haven't been getting sleep is specifically because I have been staying up until.
Yeah, I was about to say, dude, your eyes are looking.
Yeah, no, I literally went to bed at 5:20 a.m. and then woke up at 9:57 because I had a meeting, which is for the third thing I'm doing. The third thing.
Yeah, this guy did not drop out of college to waste his time.
I would be sad if I did, I think. The third thing is I'm doing some work with a friend and former colleague who is trying to start a business building ultrasound machines. and I'm doing some signal processing. I'm trying to build some signal processing algorithms that will help him or help his product kind of effectively and kind of computationally inexpensively like image arms and whatever other medical applications that you have for these ultrasounds. So yeah,
That's three things.
Three things.
Three good things.
Yes.
Are you uncomfortable at all by the idea of dropping out? Like, are you scared?
Am I scared? I think at this point I'm not scared. And I'm not scared because I have so much going on. And I'm so excited by all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I value my sleep a lot, and I stay up until 5:20 a.m. Now, it still was a mistake. Don't get me wrong. Don't stay up until 5 a.m. It will not make you more productive.
Matthew Walker would not approve.
Yeah, no, it's like super, super dumb move, and I won't do it again. But I just really feel invested in the stuff I'm working on right now, and I enjoy it to such a degree that it's just like I'm happy. I'm so happy that I'm doing it, and I'm not doing anything else. It takes up so much time, so much energy, and I'm really passionate about it.
Do you think that's what has allowed you to kind of not so much blow off school for a while, but kind of I think you have always prioritized your own projects. Maybe not always, but, and correct me if I'm wrong here, obviously, but I get the sense that you put your personal endeavors, you prioritize those over school, or you have in the past at least. Do you think what has allowed you to do that has just been like pure passion for those things?
I think often, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it would be, I mean, blowing off school and not doing anything else is not going to get you far. I don't think school is perfect, but it does deliver you like credentials as like a member in society, and so I think my urge to like not be in school, I'm very thankful that it was kind of really almost produced by like not like a level of disengagement or like disinterest in the world or like intellectual.
No, it seems like it was precisely the opposite.
It was precisely the opposite.
Yeah.
And so I honestly I'm just lucky that I have like good parents and like was like raised in a way that whatever made me curious and had the resources around me, quite frankly. Like I mean, doing what I do would be way harder if I like knew that like I didn't have any kind of net to fall back on, and I certainly don't plan on using it, and I'm gonna stay up until 5 a.m. as many times as I need to avoid that. But like I think I've just been extremely lucky in a number of ways. Most importantly is my passion for these things, but I think like my family and the resources I've had kind of supporting that throughout has been equally as critical. Just like really with like family members who are just like family members and family friends who might as well be family members who are just like super invested in my success and are like willing to work with me and teach me things.
Yeah. What do you think it says about the education system that your desire to understand the world led you to not prioritize?
Yeah, I mean,
giving your all to the education system. Why is that the case? That someone who's as intellectually curious as you is not itching to go to college.
Yeah, and I never know if I like have anything useful to say for this, because I think like often I do feel like I'm just like in this like really weird, unique situation. Like I said, with like all of this drive to do like very particular things, and then like all of these like resources of people around me who are just so supportive of that. And so I think like because I have so much luck in that area and like just so much fortune in that way, like
you can kind of afford to take that risk more than other people could.
Yeah, and like I mean, if your parents like, I mean, my parents worked a lot, but they kind of did it at different times. Like early in my life, my mom was in like med school, like literally like as she was like giving birth to my little sister. Is like she's a beast.
Nice.
And
Awesome.
then and so like my dad like notoriously like changed more diapers than my mom, which is like obviously like relatively rare. And then like my mom was kind of getting started with her career and like was around, I guess, more in like the kind of middle of my childhood, and my dad was like super busy at work. And then more recently my mom is like kind of in like the latter stage of her career and is doing like kind of more important work in medicine, or not more important, obviously she was a freaking ER doctor, but like doing like more like kind of bureaucratic high level stuff that's like I don't know, like has her working like more hours. I mean, probably doing less important stuff than saving people's lives, but but I guess I don't know, like more like kind of high fancy job kind of thing. And then my dad recently became a math teacher, which has been like a huge kind of simplification, certainly of his summer, and if not the rest of his year as well. So I think like my family is just super supportive, and that's helped really so much. And like if I didn't have that, if my parents were working like way more hours and like couldn't be there for me and couldn't kind of support my interests like that and weren't willing to engage with me in that way, like all this would be impossible. I think, and so there's this one way in which the education system is totally broken, which I think it is. I think it really just doesn't work for way too many people, and it is one of the sadder things to think about in my opinion, probably just because I have too much firsthand experience of it, but it really does sadden me like how broken education in America and in the world is. I'm hopeful.
What do you think's broken about it exactly?
I think what's broken,
because I think about this a lot, and from a subjective point of view, it feels broken.
Yeah.
Like I don't feel like I'm finding meaning out of doing homework.
Yeah.
Almost like it almost never feels meaningful, and it almost always feels like if I was left to my own devices, I could learn 100 times more than what I'm learning in the classroom.
Yeah.
And if my pure goal was to learn and I didn't really care about getting a job or, getting any of the credentials, I probably would drop out if my pure goal was to learn as much as I could. Now you could debate whether that's true or not, but it's how I feel.
Yeah.
But whenever I think about it, on the other hand, like there needs to be some kind of filter mechanism that keeps the people who are extremely industrious, able to, be successful within the because basically my thinking here is like if you're an employer, you don't just want someone who's smart. You want someone who is going to work even when they don't even understand why they're doing it. You know what I mean? And I think at times, we can get into this. But I think education does provide people who are, I guess I take back the part about, when you don't understand why you're doing it, but you want someone who's going to work extremely hard.
Yes. And
I think education filters out people who aren't willing to, not you specifically, but it does do a good job of kind of, because it's at the college level, it's very difficult to succeed if you're not a grinder. Yeah. You get to a point where you're getting tested on things that take a really long time, and if you don't put in that time, you're probably not going to get the question right on the exam.
Yes.
So it does kind of provide that. So I don't know. I don't know how you can do that exactly in a way that is more meaningful to the student. Yeah. So what are your thoughts there?
There's so much stuff. It's hard to even really know where to
gather your thoughts. I want to plug in my phone.
Yeah, so I think, there's too much, too much to really fully. I don't know the answer. I think a lot of what I think about kind of stems from like kind of two thoughts. One is like what is like the maximal social outcome of like someone going to college. Like it seems like the most prestigious thing, at least in the sphere of people I know, maybe is like if you can get out of college, you have like this like insane GPA. Like the highest status thing to do almost is like get a job at like a quant trading firm, Blackstone or BlackRock.
Yeah.
Right? And like so like if that's like the status, like the optimal thing that like this institution is selecting for, like those are the people who are considered successful, then it does really seem like what you said, which is like this is a solution to finding the people who will kind of grind and will do something that they think is maybe a little interesting, but most of all are willing to
play the status game.
Play the status game and just kind of play and work in the system, right? Like college is about working in this system, and the system has the benefit of it can teach some people certain things about math or literature or whatever subject they study, but it's a system, you have to work in it. And so if you're the kind of person who doesn't work well in like a pre-established system, which I think often I like to think that like a lot of those people are really important. I mean like not that the people who are kind of putting their heads down and grinding towards something just because they want the result, like not that it's not a bad thing, and of course there are loads of people in the world who want that, but it seems like a lot of innovation and a lot of kind of big and meaningful change is coming from people who work outside of the norm. Because if you don't work outside of the norm and you're not thinking outside of the box, like you're not gonna change anything. You're not gonna find anything new. You're not going to. You're not
going to change a system if you're just putting your head down and participating in the system.
Yeah, I mean it's almost like what we said at the beginning about like how it's hard to like reflect on an action as you're in the midst of doing it, right? Like
good connection.
Yeah. Sick connection.
Yeah.
Play the clip back at the.
Yeah. But with a sick transition.
But yeah, I think like that is a really important thing, that this education system is like doing a disservice to all these people who need a more creative, flexible,
which is probably a lot of people.
Oh, it's so many people.
I'm surely the society would be more productive if those people could actually, reach their full potential.
Yeah, and there's so much value created through kind of creativity and doing things a little differently. And obviously, building a system where the norm is doing something different makes that not the norm. But the point is like having a society that allows people to learn and do things in their different ways, like is and will always be important and of value economically, socially, from like a cultural vibrance kind of notion, perspective, whatever. And yeah, so I mean I think that's really valuable, really important, and like really overlooked in the kind of status quo of academia, education, K through 12 through bachelor through PhD or whatever. It's missing in that structure. And yeah, I think there's so much potential for change. Like I think like what Khan Academy has done, like things like MIT OpenCourseware, what like the internet has done for education and for giving people freedom to learn in different ways, like providing resources for every kind of person, at least every kind of person who can learn online, obviously, which is, I mean, a number of people have access, but whether or not you like that works for you is a different thing, obviously. But there's a lot of new mediums for education coming out every day. And the AI thing is going to be huge. I mean, the podcast is the podcast is a fantastic example of all this, right? A lot of people don't know this. Steve Jobs invented the podcast.
Really?
Like the podcast app as like an entity is obviously it's born out of kind of the idea of like the radio show.
Yeah. Now they're wiping the floor with
radio. But like this is it was a new format. It was a new format, and Steve Jobs invented it because Steve Jobs is one of these people who comes up with ideas about things that people didn't know they wanted, and so I think, I mean, that's an example of the cycle kind of feeding into itself and providing more options for more people to learn through kind of creativity and people thinking outside of the box. But AI will be a big deal, of course, for this, and I think just the growth of different technological mediums for education is just will change the structure of how this looks in 20 to 30 years. The university is on kind of moving ground at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have any idea of like what exactly you're envisioning in terms of like a different means of education for the sort of outside of the box creative people? I mean, obviously you don't need to have like the answer to this question, because I guess it is the problem that you're trying to work through, but what is your thinking around it now? Like how could we kind of provide something for people who fit the description that you gave earlier of outside of the box creative thinkers who aren't, I mean, do you...
I don't think I can answer this question well. I mean, I know...
That's why I prefaced it with, you don't have to give the answer, but do you have any sort of ideas or any kind of thoughts?
I think the only thing I'm comfortable with kind of like putting out there is like what worked for me. And what worked for me was like having one or two people who I like am really comfortable, like kind of like mentor people who are knowledgeable in a subject that I'm like comfortable asking questions to. And maybe in 10 years that's even less necessary because of how good an AI kind of assistant will be at mentoring and like kind of providing that information. But for me that was critical. And another way that was like just extremely lucky in a lot of this process. Like finding those people is just critical for me. And so I have those people, and then apart from that, like just exploiting the internet as a resource. Like it's so much stuff, and a lot of it is really bad, but so much of it is so good, and you can learn anything. I mean, like the content of the most expensive education money can buy is free today, and like that's a revolution. Like that is it's important in like macro historical perspective in terms like that's meaningful, and so for me that worked. Like having people I knew I could go to, being excited about what I was learning and pursuing that through mentorship and through online resources, like finding lectures, finding books, finding podcasts, finding whatever animated videos of topics in math or whatever it may be. It worked.
So how do you find something that you're so passionate about? Because I think a lot of people would die to have, not die, a lot of people are dying to have something that they are so passionate about, they'd literally be comfortable, making a complete 180 U-turn in their life, like doing something like dropping out of college. Like I think a lot of people are, would crave to have something that they're so passionate about that they'd be comfortable dropping out of school for.
Yeah.
How do you? I think it's just difficult to find something that you're that excited about. Do you have any insight regarding how people can, or I guess how did you go about finding things that you loved so much?
Yeah. I think this might just be another way that I'm like a little lucky, and I really don't know how like what the best way to kind of like recommend a process to someone for that would be, just because I think it would have to be so personal. But again, I guess I can say what worked for me and guess at what that might mean for others. And what worked for me was since I was a young kid, I wanted to know how things worked. Like I had like a little RC car, and I was like, how is it possible that like this is just like a totally confounding question to me. Like how is it possible that I can click this button on this remote control for this car here? The car's over there. There's like I can put my hand in between. There's like I don't know like what is happening. Like when I like flick the switch or the joystick, whatever it is, and then the car starts doing something different. Like what could possibly be making that happen? And so it was really questions like that. Like how does a motor move? Like I remember in like 4th grade, I was like obsessed with motors, and like I was like trying to learn about how all kinds of motors work, like how electric motors or combustion engines or any of these things, like what is happening to make something move without someone moving it, or like a rock falling on it to make it move. Like, it just didn't make sense to me. I didn't understand. And so I think I was just a curious person, and I was, like I said, like, excited to pursue that. And so I guess if it's never really been a problem for me to be like kind of like find that thing that I'm like passionate about, because I'm passionate about my curiosities. And
so you kind of started with the question.
I started with the question. I really started with like bewilderment, right? Like,
yeah,
like it's like as a like
well,
as
maybe
a kid,
that's a takeaway, is like find something. And this isn't a prescriptive claim, but maybe the sort of answer to my question is, well, what bewilders you?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Maybe starting there could be a great place.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think there's also another part of what drives me to do a lot of these things, and it's that I think that there are meaningful, good things to do, and I don't mean that in any like kind of like foundational or like logically correct way.
But to you, it feels like
it feels like these things I'm doing are important.
Yeah. Not in an objective truth.
Yeah.
Type of way.
Not in an objective truth type of way, because that would be a little too intense. But in more of a vibe way, like I'm invested in these projects because not only do they kind of satisfy this bewilderment and this kind of thread of bewilderment that has kind of been throughout my life about like how things work and like what is the world, but really like satisfying those two things at once, like feeling like the work is meaningful. Like for me, that's like it's affecting people positively, and they kind of want that effect to happen to them. Like I don't want to do things for people that they don't want. That seems kind of wrong. And I don't want to do things for people that I don't want to do to them or for them. And so like just finding the overlap of those things, and kind of tying in the things that I'm most curious about and most bewildered or excited to do. I think that's what's worked for me, and I think a lot of those pieces of that, are really the only ways to build like a passion in a lot of ways. Like I can't imagine someone like having a passion that they don't think is like somehow important to the broader picture of how the world works, and I can't imagine that someone is having a passion that they just kind of feel like is like kind of banal or bland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess I kind of want to transition here. Great answer, by the way.
Yeah, thanks.
So you've spoken a little bit about your interest in technology.
Yes.
I remember you mentioned recently when we were, at Miles's house about how you didn't.
The other Miles.
Huh? The other Miles, yeah. Good, yeah. Yeah, helpful clarification. Everyone who's listening knows, but so you mentioned that you did a lot of experimentation with like how much screen time like how much time you're engaged in on screens in your day-to-day life, and that you once went as far as 3 weeks without looking at a screen.
Yes.
First of all, were you exaggerating here, or did you literally go 3 weeks without looking at a screen?
Yeah, it was definitely less than a month, and it was definitely more than 2 weeks.
Okay, so around 3 weeks.
I mean, I don't know if it's like.
What did you learn?
2 days, but
my bad. What did you?
You're bad.
I didn't mean to interrupt. What did you learn from doing
that? What did I learn from doing that? Well, I think there's like a whole. I think there's like this very fashionable trend in the world, which is like, social media is kind of evil, and like using technology is evil, and I think a lot of what that taught me is like what technology is good for, and what it taught me is also that like you can regulate what you use technology for. You can experiment, and you can figure out how you want technology to fit into your life, and so I think that's worked really well for me, just because like with that knowledge I can then like be totally happy, like unless I'm being whatever like cognitively or like kind of weak in like a self-control kind of way, which I think is like I don't know. I kind of have this. I don't think people really do things that they don't want to do. I think people.
Yeah.
I think we might have mentioned this. I might have mentioned this to you in the past.
We've talked about this a little bit, and I think it's a debatable.
Yeah, it's kind
assumption.
of it's.
I'm not saying I'm against it, but I do think. I mean, you're an economist, man. So I think.
Yeah, I'm not an economist. But I'm definitely not an economist.
No, but
people thinking I'm an economist.
I'm joking. But you're interested in economics, and
yes.
I do think that is an assumption that economists tend to make, right?
Yeah, I think it's. Well, I mean, this is gonna move past the question you initially asked, but I think that assumption it's not like correct in a way that feels right, because I think often people feel like they have like these competing interests or these like competing like these competing desires, and they're like kind of like at times one wins and at times the other wins, but the truth is they're both you, right? And like they feel like they're competing, and you feel like, oh, like this is like the virtuous thing, like this is like the smart thing, this is the dumb thing, this is the fun thing, like those are all you, right? And so like when I say that
the id and the superego, they're just conflicted.
Yeah, I mean, and like so that's what I say when I don't really believe that people do things that they don't want to do.
Like some part of them wanted to do it.
I mean, some part of them wanted to do it, and not only did some part of them want to do it, that part won, right? Like that part was the part that resulted in the action. And so when I say that, I don't mean like, oh, it's hard to change these things. It's hard to use social media less if that part of you that wants to kind of better your life in a certain way feels like it is the best option to do that. That is not an easy thing to do. And it's not made easier by social media companies like whatever trying to pull you in with like studies about how to most attract you into their product, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a hard thing, but I think it's so worthwhile to consider and think deeply about like what matters for you with technology. And for me, like taking that time to experiment in that way was how I answered that question. Because without experimenting, like how are you supposed to know? Like what pieces of this kind of amazing tool are helpful to you? Mm-hmm. It's hard. And so doing that, not looking at a screen for 3 weeks, and then kind of not having a phone, but having like an Apple Watch, which I still wear. Now, at this point, I'm fully kitted out. But
you got Instagram.
I even got Instagram.
Yeah.
And so, but the important part of that is that like I'm super comfortable with that. And I'm happy every time I use Instagram that I used Instagram, and I'm happy that I'm connected in the way I'm connected to people, and that they can reach me in the way they can reach me, because it's all a choice. And the question of figuring out which choice works for your lifestyle and what you want for yourself takes time and thought, and the only way to get there is to experiment with your use and your experience with these technologies, and put in the effort to think about what you want from them. Mm-hmm. And then execute. The question is just like, can you do that, and then can you execute? And I think if people like kind of commit to that process, then they can, and if they don't, then they don't. But it's a way to do it.
How are you able to communicate with people during that time?
Oh,
very specific question, but I'm curious.
Well. So
like,
okay,
what if an emergency
I
came
think
up and your parents
the stupidest thing that happened was, so I had this camping trip in Alaska, where I.
This is not a good way to start.
Yeah. So I was at the airport.
I can't look at this photo.
I'm
stranded in Alaska.
Oh no! This wasn't during that time. That time, when I wasn't looking at the screen at all, I was like, it was super low stakes. Like I was like, it was just summer. Like it was summer. I didn't really have anything scheduled, and like I don't know, I would just like tell people the details beforehand somehow. It's like I don't know, I didn't need to communicate.
Going into monk mode.
Yeah. So
see you in 3 weeks.
no, yeah. I mean, yeah. If you tell people that, then often they'll respect it. So,
yeah.
Or they'll plan around it, which maybe is obnoxious of you to do, but you know, whatever. For a little bit of experimentation and a lifelong kind of lesson, maybe it's worth it. I think. Yeah, what I did at one point when I didn't have a phone is I had this iPad. I had like the biggest. So the iPad Pro is like one of the lines of the iPad, and in like 2016 they came out with the first iPad Pro, and then we like gifted it to my aunt, but then she never used it, so I kind of got it back like 3 years later. So I had this like super old, super freaking large iPad, which is kind of baller. I was a huge fan of that iPad, and it was like my main means of communication. So there were like, I think one time I was trying to visit my friend at Dartmouth, and like I like arrived to Hanover on the bus at like 11 p.m. and I like went around buildings looking for free Wi-Fi like in order to call him, which is super dumb. Like right, like this is a problem that is resolved by having self-control in a phone, right? like and it's amazing that is a problem that can be solved that way. Like I mean, it's a hard problem to solve, like communicating to people when they're not next to each other. Like wow, it's impressive that that's been done. But so like it was literally like traveling with a 13-inch iPad and searching for free Wi-Fi networks.
Wow.
it was fun, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, it's a cool story to tell, I guess.
So and that obviously that happened again when I was in Alaska. I was trying to find my ride, and I was confused about where it was located, and so.
But you were camping though.
No. This was at the airport as I was getting to the place.
Yeah, because I was about to say it might be hard to come by free Wi-Fi.
Obviously,
on a camping.
No, so this was in the airport, but honestly, I was less likely to figure out what was supposed to happen in Hanover, where I was like roaming around buildings looking for free Wi-Fi. Obviously, in the airport there's free Wi-Fi, but that happened.
Let me think about what the next good question is. Give me one sec. So let's talk about AI real quick. So obviously you are extremely interested in technology, and I wanted to ask, like, kind of from an existential risk standpoint. I have, a limited understanding in technology, but it seems to me that there are kind of two main camps of people with regards to AI, and one camp kind of feels that this tool can ultimately make decisions on its own, and therefore we have really no clue what's going to happen, and we don't know if those decisions are going to benefit or hurt us, and the uncertainty is kind of too high to justify not putting some serious regulations on it. The other side, I've sort of heard the talking point that it doesn't have motivations, so you can kind of choose, you can basically use human objectives to steer it in the right direction, basically.
Yes.
Which side of this kind of debate, and obviously feel free to add in whatever perspective I didn't include there, but where do you sort of fall on that spectrum?
Yeah, it's a question that people ask, and I don't really like it. I'm sorry.
Feel free, because it's a common question. So if it's a bad question,
I don't think it's a bad question. I just think it's like, to me, the answer is not different from any other question about like how the world should be, right? And the way I answer these questions for myself, and that I feel satisfied with the answer, is like just asking the question like what kind of society do we want to live in? What kind of society do I want to live in? For my family and my friends and all the other people in the world who I care about, who I don't know or whatever. Yeah. And I find a satisfying answer to that question in economics. At the moment, I think the smartest economist is David Friedman.
We'll get into that. I have a long list of questions about this.
And so I think
he's the smartest economist of all time.
I mean, I can't say I've read every economist of all time, so I'm not going to say that. He's definitely the smartest economist I've read.
Okay.
But the reason that this question comes down to that is because like this is a tool just like any other tool. It's extremely powerful.
Yeah.
Like that's absolutely true. And like, could it result in an event that led to human extinction? Yeah, Like, of course. Like, it's really, really, really powerful stuff. And it's only getting more powerful.
Yeah.
But to me, the question is like, oh,
as Sam Altman once said, it's as dumb as it'll ever be.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. Like literally every oh my god, like every 2 months, there's a new like crazy thing.
Illiterate.ai.
Yo, check it out, dude. It's sick.
I'm gonna make use of that, man. I'm excited.
No, yeah, it's only gonna get better. It's the worst it's ever gonna be today.
Continue.
Yeah, but I guess it's just another extremely powerful tool. Society has encountered these tools, and they look like the atom bomb. They look like I mean, all the things that people make analogies to, right? They look like electricity, like going down the street, like there's electricity lines everywhere. Like those weren't put there by God. Like we put those literally everywhere, and we use them literally all the time. And life would not be able to operate without them. And I think that's the way that this is moving. And the question of how to organize it, I think it's like simplistic to ask like, oh, are you in this camp? That's like, should we regulate AI? Or are you in the camp that like wants like kind of free reign, like give the companies full say? And I'm in the camp where I'm like, that's just like, neither of those are the interesting questions for me. The interesting questions for me are the same interesting questions that I ask whenever I'm wondering like, oh, like what society would I rather live in? And that's like the question of incentive structures. Like, how do I want people to kind of like live and work together? And at the moment, I'm an anarchist. So my answer would be, I'm an anarchist. Let people be anarchist.
Live and let live. You do not speak for me.
These
first principles.
Well, I guess stuff like that. But I don't believe the government is capable of doing this properly because of the way the government is involved in the definition of property rights and legal practice. And sorry, not the definition of legal practice, but the function of legal practice in the country. I also do not believe that the companies are well suited to organizing AI to be good for society in the best way it could possibly be.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. David Friedman, the best economist, his thing is all about how you create an effective emergent political system out of anarchism. Now, what he calls this is anarcho-capitalism, and that's because it looks a lot like markets. But when people hear anarcho-capitalism and think it's all about the corporation, they're right. But the image that sparks in the brain is not right. Because the image that sparks in the brain is like, oh, this like unregulated entity. And the entity that's unregulated like has all these interests that are not my interests or are not the interests of the society. And the point is that under these constraints that are laid out and talked about in this system, the incentives of the corporation are aligned with that of the society in a way that I think makes sense. And I think almost anyone who believes in kind of, I guess, kind of a 19th century kind of rationalism, consequentialism, just a little bit of utilitarianism, but a little bit of acceptance that that's not perfect. Like anyone who has those gut intuitions about the world, I think, will find a substantial amount of satisfaction in the answers put forward by David Friedman's anarcho-capitalism. So that's my answer to the question about AI.
Okay, so let's get into the anarcho-capitalism stuff. So first, help me kind of visualize what this society looks like, right? There's no government. there's no laws. Well, there are laws, but they're private. They're privatized. Yes. Well, okay, I want to start there because I think I might be wrong. Perhaps this is just me being like very poorly informed, but I think when most people think about anarchism, people who haven't like studied anarchism, their mind instantly goes to like, okay, what if someone wants to hurt me?
Yeah.
Like, what about violence?
Yes.
So now, obviously the response to this is, you know, there's still kind of law enforcement, but it's privatized.
Yeah.
What does this look like exactly?
Please, if you're interested, read the book. It doesn't really make sense until you really read the book. I'm gonna give my best shot in the coming 2 minutes I answer this question in.
Well, there are millions of people.
There are lots more. Yeah. There's a lot more thought than 2 minutes that I can put out. So, The Machinery of Freedom, David Friedman.
Yeah.
Read the book.
Milton Friedman's son, by the way.
Milton Friedman's son. Way cooler than Milton Friedman, though. Although he might not argue that. I think so. So, what does this world look like? It's not what you kind of feel it is when you hear that term, anarcho-capitalism. And that's what I was trying to say before.
Yeah.
I really think that is I think this is a brilliant idea, and I think it is horribly branded.
Yeah.
I guess maybe when he wrote that book, it wasn't so horribly branded because that was he initially wrote it in the 70s. He's revised it repeatedly since then, so it's still up to date if you find the newest version, or up to date in a couple ways. It has some outdated examples, but whatever. At that time, that was the beginning of neoliberalism and this push towards free markets and stuff. So maybe this was appealing at that time as a branding scheme, just let the capitalism go under anarchy and it will all work out. Today, that's in the world of kind of post-neoliberalism, industrial policies like Inflation Reduction Act, all that stuff, and obviously the rise of these super powerful authoritarian kind of centrally designed and run states in East Asia, it's not appealing advertising. Anarcho-capitalism is not what you think of when you think of utopia. But getting down into the weeds, what anarcho-capitalism as laid out by Friedman does is kind of move from the basis of property rights and build this entire system. But the reason that the system is interesting is because it has the ability to reflect back and edit the property right through the market. Mm-hmm. And when you can do that, one of the important theoretical parts of that picture is called Coase's theorem. Ronald Coase is another Chicago School economist who has this theorem about externalities. And he explains that under certain characteristics, which would be kind of optimized for in an anarcho-capitalist society, especially a modern one where there's communication, the externalities can be dealt with ideally by the market. Now, that's a lot of jargon that many people might not understand. An externality in kind of plain English is when I impose a cost onto someone else. And
that's not someone who's
willing, not someone who's willing to bear that cost, or has had kind of say in that cost being borne onto them. So that looks like someone smoking and exhaling into a room that I'm breathing the air in.
Yeah.
I view that as a cost. I would pay not to have that smoke enter the air in my lungs. It is of value to me for that not to happen, but because of another person's action, that's not the case, right? And I don't have the ability to say you can't do that in this space, right? Mm-hmm. So in that way, there's an externality, and so Ronald Coase outlines how you can basically get rid of externalities through the market, and when that happens, in this ideal vision, which is totally theoretical and obviously unproven, but I think makes complete logical sense. You basically have a system where the laws are basically changed to reflect externalities and externalized costs, and people transact in order to basically optimize the use of resources. And I think it would result in a society that is extremely efficient at doing what its constituents want of it, because each would have say in how that system is functioning in basically correspondence with their input and output from that system. So what they are giving to it, what they are providing to it, and what they desire from it. And so it's a lot of there's a lot of jargon there. I don't think I did.
I think it's
I did
fairly understandable. I mean, when you say that like the market basically dictates the sort of ever-changing legal system.
Yes.
Do you mean like what legal system exactly are you referring to? Like, is this the?
I'm referring to everything.
Are you just saying like people want something, the market provides it, or like the private, the existing private security will sort of change to basically maximize profit?
Yeah, when I say legal, I don't just mean like the cops, like not at all. I mean like literally like the financial plumbing that allows like corporations to operate.
Yeah.
Like all of that, like environmental regulation, everything. I think those would be emergent and optimal.
Yeah.
And optimal in this described system.
Yeah. Okay, let's just tie the first knot, which is violence.
Yeah.
Like what exactly is the, anarcho-capitalist solution to violence? Like, how does that get avoided? So is it that, I have my own private security that's basically responsible for keeping me safe, and then going after the people who, like, if, God forbid, someone tries to hurt, like,
yes.
What exactly happened? Like, convince me that I'm not going to get jumped in this society.
Yes. Yeah. So
that's your first task.
The reason, I think the reason you wouldn't get jumped, there's a couple of them. One, you wouldn't get jumped because almost everyone in the society does not want to be jumped. And when almost everyone in a society that has kind of as direct a correspondence between what its constituents want and what happens, as does a market, when there is that direct connection between what people want and what happens, that's how you get to a place where you conceptually are led to this efficiency where people aren't jumped. Now, what does that actually look like? It looks like everyone in the society buying into a legal system that they view has the laws that are correct and of value to them. And it looks like that legal system being enforced by privately contracted law enforcement who are responsible to it. And it looks like competing legal systems say you have a different legal provider than I do. And because of that, there's a discrepancy in my action. Your legal system treats it as illegal, mine doesn't.
Yeah. So how do you rectify that?
It looks like an arbitration between those two companies who are looking to satisfy each of us in their arbitration with each other. Because think about it, the most costly thing is for those two companies to go fist to fist, right?
Yeah.
Like my job is to protect Koopy, your job is to protect Miles. Like the only way we can solve this is to fight. Like that's not going to happen because that's
they're not
literally
incentivized to do it because
that's literally costly.
Yeah.
Like so that's not how this would pan out. This would pan out through an arbitration, where
this is probably a stupid question,
yes.
But what exactly is an arbitration?
It would be another independent provider, another reputable independent provider who each of these firms is comfortable deciding the outcome of this
And
case.
what if we can't find one that we both agree on?
At that point, you would go to fist fight. But think about how much incentive there is for that not to happen.
Yeah.
Right? Like, these are presumably relatively large businesses.
But what if that's not the case? Like, what if I'm just surrounded by like big dudes and you're not? Like, what if I'm confident that every single guy in my crew can beat up every single guy in your crew?
They still won't do it, right?
Why not?
Because businesses and collective action through markets is so powerful, right? It doesn't matter how physically large, like you can have like 18 like prime Mike Tysons like surrounding you, walk past me on the street, and I won't be worried. And the reason I won't be worried is because the whole system of governance and markets and legality is so effectively operating, so optimal for me as a consumer, given my preferences, which are
right, of course.
if they're like really weird preferences, like I don't want you to speak in my presence, like there's no firm that's going to provide that as a legal benefit or as like a law, because that's ridiculous. There's no demand for that.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you end up with these laws that are.
So you end up with something that's still kind of socially acceptable by our standards because it's what the majority of people are demanding.
And if you have, I mean, even if you have 10 people who want something and they all.
Wait, but I still don't understand why if like we get into a security dispute and I'm confident that I can like. Because it's kind of a ridiculous example, but it might not be, right? If I have prime Mike Tyson's and you don't, I don't think it would cost me very much to mess you guys up.
Okay, your prime Mike Tyson's come and they rip me apart. They literally kill me. Like that's the worst thing that could happen to me. And now what happens to you and your Mike Tyson's? So your legal system is going to represent you. My legal system is going to represent me. There is no arbitrator in the market who would ever say that my legal system does not have, and my legal operator and my legal enforcers do not have the there's no one who would not say we don't have the right to incarcerate you and like take all of your assets, like or even kill.
So like if you were paying for another arbiter,
because
then it's basically guaranteed that firm can hold me accountable.
You will be held accountable.
And what? So then what happens? Like, am I now going to? So that arbiter is that the word?
Arbitrator. Arbiter. I guess I think it is
arbiter. Is that whatever that is that firm now like taking me and then sending me to a private jail that they now are?
No. So look.
What exactly happens?
I have my legal firm and legal enforcers. Your legal firm, your legal enforcers, they find an arbitration agency. The arbitration agency is like, this is like the clearest place I've ever seen. Like you had 18 Mike Tysons and you picked on this skinny little guy and you killed him. The legal system in both cases says, because no one would ever buy a legal system that allowed that, right? So presumably both legal agencies.
I'm sure there's not much demand for a legal system that allows Mike Tyson to beat up Miles.
Exactly. Segal. And so 18 at that, right? Like not even just one Mike Tyson. So what would happen is you would likely be sent to prison or killed. And all of your assets
killed. That doesn't.
Maybe if capital punishment is in demand in whatever area we are, maybe we're in frickin' Alabama, dude. And people are into capital punishment. If people are into capital punishment and they're buying capital punishment, you're gonna get capital punishment, and all of your assets will be taken from you and probably given to my family.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, what's to stop
this? And like consider that. Like consider the difference between that and the legal systems we have in place today.
Yeah.
Which do you feel like would
where
be
now
more effective?
I can pay for the better lawyers.
You can pay for the better lawyers. You can buy the politician. You can buy the judge. That's happened before, right? Yeah. And so, like, think about the difference in efficacy there.
But why couldn't that happen why exactly wouldn't that be able to happen in a completely privatized society?
So if let's say you're concerned, okay, like there's going to be a super rich guy who's going to come after me, right? And because he's super rich, like he's buying up law, he's buying up arbitration, and they're always going to rule in his favor, right? Because he's rich.
Yeah.
So that's only the case if this is a way that markets are kind of unexpectedly or I guess characteristically in the way that most people look at them, like equal or provide some form of equality, which is where like there can be one like super rich guy. But he's not going to be rich for long if he's buying these policies and not providing to the market. And he's buying policies which allow him to go around punching people, and he's like fully funding these companies.
I also really don't believe that there are that many people who genuinely want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, of course. And
I don't think people are just fundamentally.
But the point is that you shouldn't ever rely on people's kind of fundamental like willingness to be good.
Yeah.
Like you should be designing a system, and I think the system that we're talking about works to this end, which is kind of funneling people in the right direction through incentives.
Yeah.
And so because there's this one rich guy and he's buying up all these policies that allow him to go around punching people, well, if me and my community, maybe we're nowhere near as rich. Maybe we're, let's say, 10 million times less rich. I mean, if we're 10 million times less rich, then it's going to take 10 million. I mean, 10 million times less rich is a lot less rich, but I mean, it does exist. People are worth $10 million and people are worth $1 in this country. I don't think that's in this country, obviously, and I think there would be less inequality in this given setup with anarchic.
You think there'd be less inequality?
I think there would be less.
Okay, we can get into that because I have some questions about
and so in that world, like all these people, I mean, think about maybe these people even take out debt. Maybe like these 10 million people who like obviously like they're pissed off as fuck that like this guy is going to like just punch them in the street, like just because he's worth $10 million he gets to punch me in the street. Like maybe these people take out debt. And they're like we just like we need to get rid of this. Like this is like totally unacceptable.
Yeah.
Maybe they move. Like maybe they go like there's a lot of solutions, and I really think the most important part is that the inequality would never be would never be so vast. That it ever really takes. Like,
dude, you got the Democrats calling, man. They have some questions.
Yeah, Joe Biden.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, so is Trump because he's worse in a lot of respects in this way. But
Biden's gonna pick up the phone and just start stumbling.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, I think.
Anyway,
I think it's unintuitive to a lot of people that makes sense and that works. And honestly, for me, it's hard to communicate. And it's not hard to communicate because it makes no sense, even though that might be some people's impression from listening to this podcast. It's hard to communicate because it's so different.
That's what I was about to say. Like it's so, and this is sort of what I was alluding to earlier before we got started, which is like reading this book, every sentence is a different world.
Yeah. And
it's so far from anything that I've ever even considered.
Yeah.
Because I've just always I haven't even really questioned why there's a government in place. Like I've always sort of just assumed that this is what we need to kind of keep society from devolving into, chaos and confusion and, violence, I guess. Not that those are rational presumptions, but that's sort of how I felt. So yeah, I mean, it's extremely different, but yeah, I mean, I kind of wanted to press down on the whole inequality issue. One thing, and I think that sort of ties into one of the questions that I had, which I guess we can kind of answer both at the same time, which is related to the education system. Again, this might just be a false presumption, but I think that education is, pretty important in terms of reducing systemic inequality, right? Yeah. If people are poor, they're most likely in a poor neighborhood where the schools are poorly funded, and of course on the other end of the spectrum you have rich people who can either send their kids to a relatively high-end public school or potentially a private school, both of which are significantly better alternatives than the poor poorly funded public school,
Yes.
Which for obvious reasons is going to result in kind of a, I guess what the Democrats would sort of say is like a rich stay rich, poor stay poor kind of society.
Yes.
Why? I guess my sort of intuition is that in the anarchist society, and I'm sure you can correct me here, but my intuition is that would almost be propelled because, now you're just literally however rich you are, that's the private school that you can pay for. So you basically have schools that are almost, and this is my presumption, not my interpretation of the idea, but like it would feel as though, the richest person is going to send their kids to the most expensive school. The middle class people are going to be able to send their kids to kind of a mid-tier school, and then the people who are at the bottom, like low socioeconomic status, are going to send their kids to a not so great school. How is that fair, and how could that possibly, how could that system reduce the inequality that exists?
Okay. Yeah, I think this is possibly the easiest example of how the anarchist capitalist system would be actually substantially better. And so it's like, it's
dude, I felt so good about my question.
No.
This is the easiest question to answer.
No. Like, honestly, I think.
No, I'm joking. I didn't
it's
think
a good
about
thing.
that.
It's a good thing because I think it demonstrates how the system works in an interesting way, and it'll be helpful. So, what we have in America today is basically the worst parts of what the anarchist system would offer, and just destroying the best parts. Okay. The reason I say this.
I can see. I think this is an interesting point. Yeah.
The reason I say this is because rich people can pay for whatever school they want.
Yeah, that's sort of that. I guess that.
And so the high end looks exactly the same. Looks exactly the same. The only difference is what's happening at the low end. What's happening at the low end is people don't have choice or have substantially limited choice about what school they go to.
Yeah, they can either find a way to fork over $50,000 a year to go to private school, which is virtually impossible for basically everyone in the country.
Or they go to the local school, which literally is funded by the wealth of people in the neighborhood, which is poor because the person is poor. So that's it is so regressive and possibly one of the most despicable kind of structures of current government that is how public schools are funded, by local neighborhoods. I'm not the first person to say this, and I'm not the person to say it most eloquently. So if you want to learn about that, learn about that. But point is, in the alternative system, what do you have? You have the same exact high-end school. It's not better than it is now. What is different is what the middle and low end looks like. The reason that's true is because, one, efficiency. The way education is structured and the legality around doing things and bureaucracy around changing academic content and teaching style and adapting to new academic technology is extremely, not good, right, for these public schools that are underfunded, and so you have this level of adaptation and added administrative efficiency, and more or less the same money going in. A lot of schools are just really bad because they don't get money.
Why would you have added efficiency? Is it because
you have added efficiency because markets are implicitly more efficient at providing goods to customers.
So you'd be imagining in this poor neighborhood, if the one school that exists is kind of a.
There's only every public school has a monopoly on its students.
So it's in that neighborhood, if that one kind of. Well, actually, you can continue.
Yeah. So if every school has a monopoly on its students, they can't go anywhere else. Then there's no reason for that school to get better. And because the world is random, it will eventually just get worse because there's nothing pushing it in one direction, and added bureaucracy and the small differences in efficiency between bureaucratic kind of legal monopoly governments that we have today. It's worse. it's worse than market provided results. And so, again, I'm not probably explaining this as compellingly as David Friedman can. This is something specifically that David Friedman takes like multiple chapters to address in the book, and it's something that Milton Friedman, the famous economist, and David Friedman's father, like actually like made like it's like he has like a foundation for this. Mm-hmm. It's about moving schools to voucher systems where you have an educational voucher, and so there's so much low-hanging fruit in optimizing markets around providing better education in this country, and I think this system of anarcho-capitalism is horribly branded and doesn't come across as correct to people's intuitions.
I guess it would
actually efficiently provide educational goods substantially better.
One intuition that I would have is that if people are starting a new school, they're going to market it towards the people who can afford it rather than the people who are like, kind of at the bottom and can't really afford to pay very much, right? Because it's not, obviously, with all due respect, not trying to, sound offensive here, but it's not as attractive of a customer if they don't have as much money, to someone who's trying to start a business. You'd want, you're incentivized to, extract as much money as you possibly can. Why wouldn't all the best educators just think, how can we get rich people to come to our school?
Well,
like, why wouldn't that
because
happen?
it's a competitive market, right? So, because it's a competitive market, if everyone's targeting the top 1% of customers, and no one's targeting the bottom 99, soon the market's gonna kind of re-equilibrate. Come back to equilibrium.
What would the word be?
Re-equalize.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
I was about to say re-equilibrize. No, that's a fair point.
And so it will come to the point where there is as much competition and as much effort going into extracting the profit of the bottom 10% as there is the top 10. It's the beauty of markets. Yeah,
but obviously there would still be some,
the resources would be worse. Yeah, I mean, the resources. Of course, there's going to be inequality. Yeah. And I think the important piece of what anarcho-capitalism isn't that it looks like a communist utopia, because it doesn't, right?
And I'm sure any anarcho-capitalist would, be very insistent that it shouldn't.
But the reason it shouldn't is because communist utopias can't last unless they have something driving them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to, represent that perspective.
I understand.
But I do think that having some, being able to achieve something that looks similar to equality of opportunity within the realm of education is critically important for society. And, I mean, do you think that that's achievable within the anarcho-capitalist model?
Yeah, I do. And the reason I do is because there's a lot of arbitrary and just intuitively incorrect ways that the current world allocates value to individuals, right? There's people who make $100 million salaries as CEOs, and they're still people. They still need to sleep for 8 hours a night. Are they doing something 10 million times more efficient than a McDonald's worker? Are they 10 million times more capable? No, but that's the way our current markets value their time, and so in a world where you have anarcho-capitalism and there is no arbitrary finger on the scales of how to organize society, and it's all organic and it's all about maximizing the value created for everyone in the society, what does that look like? It looks like people being paid what they're worth. Yeah. And it looks like let's say anyone who can find let's say there's all of a sudden there's a change in some technology surrounding labor, and there's now this new demand for a certain kind of worker who's educated in a certain way. And there's a whole bunch of companies who are interested in this worker. In a perfect market, what's going to happen is those companies are going to start a group, and they're going to basically just start subsidizing and paying for education in this way because they need these workers. There's this new technology that arises, and so it's the total market, the totalizing market that doesn't have anyone pushing their finger on the scales means that things like are reasonable in this way that they're not right now. Because there is no reasonable world where someone getting paid minimum wage at a McDonald's is can only ever provide 1/10,000,000th of the value of some CEO. Now the CEO is definitely more educated, maybe he can provide a lot of value because he has a lot of insights and experiences and knows a lot about a certain important market.
Yeah.
But that is a failure of the society that individual who's getting paid minimum wage, it's actually a failure in the other way, where the guy who's getting paid that much money is getting paid that much money likely unreasonably, and it's a failure in both, really. Sorry.
They both what?
It's a failure that individual, that there's such a big gap, right?
Yeah.
Because one of them has to be wrong, and likely they're both wrong, right?
Yeah.
Because if one person who still sleeps 8 hours a day and still has 2 hands and 1 brain and 2 eyes is 10 million times more effective at providing value to society, then there's an inefficiency, right?
Yeah.
And it's a profound inefficiency. It's not like some small thing where someone made a mistake somewhere. There's something wrong. And the reason that this happens is because there's fingers on the scale, and there's monopolies in the most important market, the legal market, right?
Okay, what do you mean exactly?
The provisioning of law. The thing that allows people to do things or not do things. The thing that results in people kind of incarcerated or with guns to their head, or not, right? That's what it comes down to. What you can and can't do because someone will stop you. That is what legality is. And so that is the guardrails of a society.
Wait, why?
It's the most important thing to be decided effectively collectively, and the most dangerous thing for a select number of people at the top in power to decide. And the world we live in is a world where elected politicians that don't have the best interest of their constituents at heart, because they only get elected every 4 years, and they're trying to lie their way into office and extract as much out of it as they can. Those are not the people who are going to be most aligned with your interests as a person living in a legal system, right? Because those people are going to decide the things that work for them, and maybe you don't even have an option. This election is crazy, right?
Yeah.
And it's crazy because there's 2 guys who aren't really very effective at doing what we want them to do, what we all want them to do, which is make society better, and be able to run the country effectively, and that's a factor of the structure we have in place, and the fact that we can't optimize, and we do not have a legal system that is kind of connected so soundly to the interests of its constituents.
Okay, so number one, I think it's interesting.
I do have to go.
Oh.
I should probably leave.
Oh, you gotta go now. Dude, fuck. We're getting right into the... Alright, that's fine.
Yeah.
We should do a part 2, though.
Yes.
But can I make one last point?
Yes, please.
I think it's interesting that your very capitalist economic theory actually seems to be growing out of socialist morals, right? Because in some, correct me if I'm wrong.
Stop. No, sorry.
No, feel free to push back hard.
No,
but it seems like you have a lot of sympathy for the people at the bottom,
yes,
and the huge inequality, and it's
the only thing I have sympathy for, right? And I the first time I saw this logic, I was like, that makes no sense, because it doesn't make sense at all with any kind of conventional wisdom about pretty much anything about how the world works and how society functions. And it took a lot of time for me to adapt and basically overcome the kind of I don't want to, I don't know, it's just what I was used to thinking about how things operated, how society works.
It's almost like a barrier to entry.
Yeah,
like
it's a huge thing,
yeah.
and I really do think it's like honestly a branding problem because like.
Yeah, because like I said at the beginning, people associate just
the word capitalism. Yeah, like it's
and capitalism.
Capitalism has so many.
Yeah, anarchy and capitalism are two words that are just not branded.
It's really not about. It's really not about what you think of at all when you think of those things. And I don't want the outcome to be like the corporations of today have all the power and the say. The point is, the entire point is that those corporations would not operate in the ways that they can today because they would not be able. Because the reason that they are able is because there's this huge discrepancy between what the society kind of collectively wants and what emerges, because we have this kind of funnel that all the interests of society has to get through, which is called the government, and it filters out so much kind of rich information and diverse kind of values into this one super weak and ineffective structure of legality. And this is why I say like the important thing is not the market as we understand it. The important thing is the market operating towards a legal system. Like, what does that mean? And getting into the weeds of how that would recursively affect itself. Like, okay, you have a market operating on a legal system, operating on the you have a market operating through a legal system back onto that legal system, which then affects how the market works. And so it's this recursion, which is driven by the consumer, by the person who is available to do work, cognitive work, physical work, as an employee of some kind of group, but also there as a person who is looking for the life they want, and is looking to live that life in community with other people who share similar goals or similar fundamental values, and it's a beautiful thing, and it's the same vision that Marx was looking for when he writes the Communist Manifesto. It's no one has different values here. Like when as I identify as an anarchist capitalist, there's going to be a bunch of people who are like, oh, this guy's like a selfish prick who like loves big business.
He just wants he's greedy.
And honestly it's a little I mean it's that's a hard thing for me to experience because like I don't know, it's just uncomfortable, right? Like I'm trying to.
No, dude, I'm perfectly fine with people thinking I'm a greedy, selfish prick.
No, it's so. But the point is that this system, I wish it was explained in a way that was at the forefront. Like that it's all about creating value, and creating the value that people want. When they
All right, we'll definitely have to talk about. I mean, if you're down to do another one at some point, we should talk about or I guess on our personal time, we should talk about why exactly the government is so central in your opinion, in terms of creating this inequality and creating these systems that don't operate in a way that is in the interest of the members of society. Like, why is the government creating this discrepancy? But anyway, good episode. Thanks for hopping on.
Thanks, Coop.